good. So yes, I am based here at Life Cycles. We're a small consultancy working in the sustainability metrics area. And our mission really is to enable organisations to use better sustainability metrics in their decision making and communication. So we really focus on whatever it is needed to help do better metrics, and that involves software, training, developing data, and also doing straight up life cycle assessment style projects. When I was sort of thinking through this, the topic is, why are we looking at recycled content? What's the main driver? Is the driver quality of material? And I'd say pretty much no. Recycled content is normally and going to be a lower quality or an equivalent quality, so it's not really a strong driver. Availability of a commodity, maybe for some things, but not likely that you're going to have to use recycled content because you can't get virgin material. Cost, sometimes recycled material will be at a little bit cheaper. Sometimes it will be more expensive given the difficulties, which leaves us to environmental performance and marketing linked to that environmental performance. I am assuming that's why we're all logged on here today to think about using recycled content, because we're coming at it very much from an environmental point of view. I'd be interested to know if that's a fair statement. So given that, if that is our driver, and it's certainly my driver for coming on today, and always, evaluating what's happening with environmental performance, we want to make sure that if we are using recycled materials and incorporating recycled content, that we end up with a better environmental performance, both for the product that you're using and for the world. And you might think that these would be synonymous, but it's potentially that they are not. They can be different, given that you may end up with the sort of footprint of your product being lower because you've found you've sourced a material that is secondary, and under the technical accounting rules, you don't need to account the burdens associated with the prior material production. But it might be that your utilization of that material actually has some indirect displacement effects, that material isn't available to other people to use elsewhere in the world in a more optimized way. And so we want to be careful that when we're using environmental recycled content, that it is both from a systems point of view and from a product point of view, that it actually has an environmental benefit. When we are looking at getting recycled content, we have the difference between pre-consumer waste and post-consumer waste, and we also have post-industrial waste. And there are, having been involved in this area for a long time, there have been various times when a company or an organisation is using pre-consumer waste, and it's sort of like fake recycling because, it's not real recycling that happens at the, with post-consumer material. However, whether it's pre-consumer or post-consumer, from a life cycle assessment point of view, doesn't have a huge difference. What is the more important differentiator is, what does the pool of recycled material look like? What are the dynamics of how the recycled content is, where it's sourced from, and that market, and how you actually access it? And so I've broken it up into 4 different types of recycled markets. Those that might be limited by supply, those limited by collection, those limited by technology, and limited by demand. So limited by supply, what I mean there is things like precious metals. Is there such a thing as recycled gold and recycled silver? It certainly exists in the market, and I have seen some marketing under where people will people wanting to make sustainable jewelry and things will say, oh yes, and we only use recycled gold and recycled silver. That's a little bit of a it's not like there is gold and silver and gems and things out there lying around that no one wants that you're accessing. There's the recycled and virgin markets in those areas are virtually the same because they're so valuable. There's no problem getting that material collected, find someone to recycle it, find some way back in. In fact, the price of it really demands that material will be circulated. So I'm not sure too many people today were looking at getting recycled precious metals into their supply chains, but this is sort of the extreme where the material is really limited by the supply. There's only so much recycled supply in the market, basically waiting for these metals to get to their end of life and then be brought back into the supply chain. And so you can't use the recycled version of it to try and dodge what the footprint is of using those sorts of materials. We then have materials which I'm calling limited by collection. And so these are your classic well-recycled materials, the metals, steel, aluminium, copper, paper, clear PET. Sorry, I've moved the clears in the wrong PET, those sorts of things where once it's collected and if it's in reasonable condition, not highly contaminated, the recycling is a fait accompli. It will happen. There are strong markets. There are many uses and drivers for recycling to happen. There is still some material in the market that is not sourced, and that is typically because of economic or behavioural factors. And so, the yield of aluminium is actually quite terrible from curbside. I think it's like around 50%. Recovery of steel probably isn't that much better. Glass and PET and paper all do a bit better than that, I think. But there are, if you're using those materials, and incorporating them into your products, the main benefits of that incorporation is that it will, you may, by increasing the demand and increasing the price paid for the waste commodities, you have that potential to increase the investments in collection, the investments in behavioural programs, the prices, the viability of the industry. But by and large, the recycled and virgin markets are quite similar. If you look at the price of scrap and virgin aluminium, once they're actually processed, they're relatively similar. And these days, even sort of Patagonia and things like that are not talking about using recycled polyester, and that's a major boon. They're like, okay, it's pretty easy to do, and it's not particularly innovative. We then have some materials which are really limited by technology, and I suppose the collection technology bit are of course linked, but here we're looking at maybe batteries, engineered plastics, carpets, where we have materials, we have them in quantities, but the recycling is limited again by investments, not so much in how do we get them from people, but once we get them, how do we actually process them, and what sort of technology do we use? And so here we're relying on the good people down at Deakin, down in Geelong, who are working on technology of recycled products, and also UNSW, I think, have a lot of activity in this area. And so I suppose in terms of if you can source materials and work with facilitating new investments and technologies in these materials, then you will be leading to some new avenues for recycling, increasing the overall global circularity of stuff. But the challenge there is really to get over the technological limitations. And then the last one is where things are limited by demand. And so here's where where materials are available in bulk. There's a lot of them, but the economics of collection and reprocessing are poor. And so here we have the stockpiles of anything from mixed flexible plastics, and obviously we all know the story of the red cycle and how difficult that was. But also, many other commodity plastics, glass in certain situations. And so finding markets is difficult. And so in these areas, if you are able to source recycled content from these types of materials, you might genuinely increasing the circularity of the economy because you are providing an avenue. So in terms of your priority, if you're going after recycled things and you're told that we need to have 20% of our materials from recycled stuff, you wouldn't focus on getting recycled steel and recycled paper. You would focus on these sorts of areas where you can really source new materials that are currently got poor recycling outcomes to actually get materials that are essentially coming free rather than competing just with other people for the heavily recycled commodities. Of course, back in these ones which are limited by collection, if you can do something which actually facilitates better collection and separation, increasing yields, and so that's like we want to be operating at all stages of the recycling loop, both specifying recycled material, but also facilitating material recycling by designing for recycling, designing for collection, those sorts of, and specifying materials that can be recycled at end of life that have a good, strong recycling outcome. Okay, so when you're incorporating recycled content, what will your effect be on the world? And so this is where we're always coming at it from a life cycle perspective. Are you going to increase the global recycling rate? Are you recycling neutral? Maybe you're taking in 80% recycled content and you're recycling at 80%, and it's sort of like you take as much as you give. Or are you a source of material leakage? In case you use recycled materials, but you create things which cannot be recycled at end of life. And look, it's not terrible if you're producing something obviously from mixed flexible plastics in the playground situation. The recycling outcomes for those things at end of life are going to be challenging. You're going to be in a different product group. That's recognised. But if you are, there's a interesting, this is a little flow diagram from the Green Building Standard, EN 15804, is a European building LCA standard that's used for anyone certifying to Green Star, green buildings. And when you're looking at how they deal with this, the demands between recycled content and recycling end of life and evaluating that, they only actually give you credits for recycling for the net amount of recycling that happens across the life cycle of your products. So you might be using 40% recycled material. It may be recycled maybe at 80% at the end of life. It's typically, metals and things would get that or more. But they avoid partly because they avoid double counting of the recycled benefit of using recycled content on the input side. They only count the offsetting of recycling when you put it back and get it recycled around a loop. They only count the difference between your recycled input and your recycled output. Now, if you happen to have maybe 100% recycled input and 20% recycling at end of life, then you're a leaker. You are net losing material from the economy. And you actually have to, in this standard, if you're doing an LCA of this, you actually have to put in a bunch of top-up virgin material to account for the fact that over the life, your net contribution of your activity was to lose consumed material from the recycled/virgin pile and actually give less back than what you took, which is an interesting sort of balanced way of, what you're looking at your net effect on the overall world of circularity. Other considerations when sourcing and using recycled content relating to the environmental benefits. Is your commodity the best use of that material? And so when we have a, the markets for recycled materials are very poor at times, and maybe you've come up with a way to utilize a large amount of very high grade material in something that's pretty dumb. So you could use, ABS or, high grade engineering polymers, and you could create bollards. And yes, technically it's recycling. You've taken a secondary material and you've made something that is vastly over engineered for what it's doing. you may be able to do that in the short term, but is that a sensible use of that material? Or, should you maybe try and focus on, okay, there are better ways that we can actually use to achieve that purpose of what a bollard looks like. And maybe there are long-term better uses for that material. Of course, you would expect economics to sort of sort that out in some ways. But as I say, sometimes we see examples of recycling where someone really wants to be green and they're willing to subsidize it, beyond the natural economics of the situation, and yet you're really it's recycling for recycling's sake. The second question you really want to think is the environmental impact reduced, and what is it that's actually being recycled? And so if we think about when we talk about recycled product and recycled content, what's actually recycled, if we think about, here is a piece of paper, and when we have paper, we need forestry, and we need to treat the wood with caustic soda and heat and things to get rid of the lignins, and then we pulp it, and then we make paper, and we do printing. We then can collect it and send it back into pulping. But so what's actually recycled in this situation really is the forestry and the chemical treatment of wood is what's actually being recycled. The pulping, the sort of mashing it up in a whole lot of water, making paper, printing it again, and collecting, that has to happen on every loop. And we'll sort of ignore for the moment that you'll lose a bit on every loop. And so, when we talk about recycled paper, actually, we probably should talk about virgin paper making with recycled fibers. So it's really only the fibers in recycled paper that are technically recycled. And I know it's a distinction, but it really goes to, as we try to work out how the environmental balance will play out for different recycled commodities, what's important here is, what are the impacts of forestry and chemical treatment of wood to turn it into sort of the pulp-ish material, compared to what's the impact of paper making, what's the impact of pulping, printing, and collection. And if these processes are the dominant processes of environmental impact, it sort of makes the whole recycling thing less attractive. And it's important to understand that if it is less attractive, because what we want to know when we're looking at these strategies is, I've got an environmental impact associated with a product system, and I have options to lightweight, I have options to avoid, I have options to switch to different materials, and I have options where I can just switch to the same thing I've always been doing, but a recycled version of it. And so it's important to understand where the recycled version of it sits compared to all the other things you could potentially do. And if the recycled version is only marginally better, well, then you go, okay, it might be worth doing, but it's not transformative in terms of transforming that product system and our economy and our organisation into a sustainable organisation. You've created a bit of circularity, and yes, it's worthwhile doing, but this doesn't make paper sustainable. Recycled paper is not sustainable, if anything is sustainable, but given that all the things that happen every time, just because it's recycled doesn't mean it's you've avoided all those impacts. Similar with oil and plastic. So, if you've got oil and gas, that's the bit that's recycled, the oil and gas extraction and the resin manufacture. But you need to injection mold the thing every time. There's actually probably 50% of the impacts of a plastic product are this conversion, molding, extrusion, blending, compounding sort of things that you do before you actually mold a piece of plastic. So, yes, it's worth doing. No, it doesn't mean that the thing becomes a zero environmental impact. So that's just worth keeping in your mind. And different materials have different levels of impact in those ways. So if I look at an example here, this is from shifting into sort of the more building related area. This is from a study we did on in Western Australia, but it pretty much relates to almost anywhere. This is for recycled aggregates from building rubble. And it's sort of like, where are the impacts occurring? And so for the recycled product, we have a fairly high amount of impact for the recycling collection, a little bit of reprocessing, and a bit of transportation delivery to market. And that's balanced against the virgin product, where there was, in this case, avoided landfill transport to landfill if you didn't recycle it, avoided landfill activities, avoided virgin material transport because you're going to need to transport, and avoided virgin material. And so here you can see the actual product itself is maybe is not the main deal. Here there's a lot of logistics, which means it's going to be quite site specific as to where does the virgin product come from, how far is it between the source of the secondary material and the recyclers, can those things be things? So there's a lot of, that's like a low value recycled product. If we then look at something like steel, where the only thing that matters is the actual material itself. So the processing of scrap steel back into steel is the main impact of recycling steel. The main impact of virgin steel is making virgin steel, and all the other bits and pieces, transportations and movements around, are very, very small. At least in Western Australia, they were very, very small. And so, yeah, you can sort of look at these for all things, but typically the metals follow this sort of pathway, and the sort of aggregates are more about logistics and then what you're saving when you're doing those things. So, summary. I think recycling is generally beneficial and something should happen. It's really just how we contextualize it amongst the other strategies that we have as to how many gold stars we get for incorporating recycled content. And that will vary depending on which material, and you should really be trying to focus on increasing the overall circularity rather than just trying to tick a box and say, oh, well, yeah, just switch all those things over to recycled content and then everything is solved. So the amount of benefit really depends on the availability of supply, the scope of what's actually being recycled, and the logistics around the recycled and virgin supply chains. Thanks.